So good afternoon. I'm Sharon Meyer. For those who've just joined us, please would you mute your phone. So today's conversation is about chocolate. So chocolate invokes all kinds of memories for us. It's that rich, luscious deliciousness. It makes us feel good. We get very addicted to it. And there are very few of my patients who say chocolate is not the top thing on their list. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of chocolate and actually the history of it. I always find the history of all kinds of spices very, very interesting and fascinating. And how did that food that so many people have been using forever get to where it is today, and how do we use it ourselves? So the chocolate, chocolate comes and has been used by the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the other ancient peoples of Mexico, Central America, South America, and it was a very revered form of spice. It was cacao. The Aztecs called it the food of the gods, and they used to honor their deities with ceremonial drinks. And the ceremonial drink was called chocao. And that's where we get the name chocolate from. And so what they would do, they concoct this drink. It was extremely an elaborate ritual, but they would extract the seeds from the cacao pods, they would roast them, and then they would use the powder with giant stones, kind of like a mortar and pestle that we use today. Then to the powder, they added boiling water with some honey and some ground corn, annatto, and red chilies. And then the mixture was slowly stirred over a fire until it became a delicious, frothy blend. Now, Montezuma, who was the Aztec leader, is said to have drank 50 cups of chocao out of a golden goblet on one occasion. He was very famous for that. So after a while, chocolate was imported to Europe by the Spanish. Of course, the Spanish had got to South America, and they took chocolate back to Spain in the 15th century. But it was only used by royalty and the aristocrats. Anyone that had some money could have chocolate. But by the 17th century, cocoa houses were opening up in other parts of Europe, and particularly in England. But again, it was an expensive commodity, and only if you had a lot of money could you buy cocoa. But it was interesting that the English really took to chocolate. In fact, the British Royal Navy brewed a cocoa drink called Kai, and Kai was to keep sailors awake on night watch. So they'd make this brew, and the brew was considered an art and required an apprenticeship. So if you were going to be making Kai, you had to go and study with somebody and learn how to make it. And it was considered potent enough. Only time you would drink it is when it was potent enough and thick enough, it would hold a spoon standing straight up. So the spoon would stand up in this liquid Kai, and that's what they would use. And then it started to move into the other parts of Europe too, France. So the timeline between France and Portugal and England is a little dubious. But certainly Italy also, the whole of Europe, got to have chocolate in different forms, and they were using it in different ways. But there were some interesting health properties to chocolate, and there is a book called The True History of Chocolate, where they talk about the healthful components of chocolate. And one of the texts claimed that it comforted the liver, aided in digestion, and made one happy and strong. It was also known to heal heart pain. So it's kind of fascinating when we think about those sort of things. The other thing, too, is that cocoa beans, going back to the early days of the Aztecs and the Mayans, was used as a form of money. It was also used for trading. It was, again, used for the rituals, the religious rituals, too, but it was also used as a form of taxes. And it was also used during times of funerals for noblemen only. Later on, the Mayans used cocoa or coconut drinks as a form of champagne at weddings. So it has a long history of being used for comfort and for celebration. But we've been using it in recipes too. So a lot of times we think of cocoa only as cocoa or chocolate, as in candy bars or in cookies. But people have been using them in different cuisines for many, many years. So there is an old Sicilian lasagna recipe that includes crumbled unsweetened chocolate in the meat sauce. Spanish cooks braised rabbit and squab in wine and chocolate. They also, the Spanish, combined powdered chocolate, milk, and butter and poured it over steamed lobster. Doesn't that sound absolutely delicious? I could have something like that right now. But it was certainly still being used in Mexico for more commonly as a drink and with cinnamon added to it. But cocoa has also been added to fish soups, corn chowders, spicy sauce bases like sofritos, and also spice blends called recados. It's also a key ingredient in mole. We know that. I mean, most people know that chocolate is one of the most important ingredient in mole. But one of the most complex of the moles is mole negro, and this comes from Oaxaca in Mexico, and it includes more than 20 ingredients and takes absolutely hours to make. When I make chili, and I'll admit to have won a few of those chili cook-offs, the secret ingredient is always going to be chocolate or cocoa powder. If I'm doing stews or sometimes even soups that needs a little bit of a coloring, I'll add some cocoa powder to it, and it gives it that richness, and the taste is just so amazingly different. So where does cocoa come from? What is this all about? So the cocoa tree is a small tree that sprouts these large fruit pods that contain the cocoa beans. Now, the cocoa beans are extremely bitter, and they are virtually inedible. And so when you want to turn them into chocolate, the beans have to be fermented, they have to be dried and roasted, then the shells are removed, and this reveals the nibs. The nibs are then again ground and liquefied, and it results in a chocolate liqueur. That liqueur is further refined into either cocoa solids or cocoa butter, and it's the cocoa butter that we use in a lot of the candies and the chocolates that we know today. So interestingly enough, most of the cacao or the chocolate is going to be grown in countries like Mexico and Central and South America, but also in West Africa. We're getting a lot of the cocoa and the chocolate from West Africa, Sri Lanka, Java, and Malaysia. Okay. So now the medicinal facts around chocolate is quite extensive. There's been quite a few studies that have been done. So it starts off with phytochemicals and phytonutrients. And if you've heard me talk about this before, we're talking about this again as it relates to chocolate. So phytochemicals are involved in many functions in the body. We need these nutrients. These molecules are absolutely important they are antioxidants, they're antimicrobials, they're antiviral. They turn on our healthy genes. They reduce inflammation, they support our immune system, and they repair cells. They repair the signaling factors of our cells too. So we do need these nutrients. So in chocolate, we have a bunch of different phytochemicals, flavonols. And these flavonols are very health promoting. So they've done numerous studies around chocolate, and what they have found that it's very healthy for the heart. So it increases your HDLs, your healthier cholesterol molecules. It reduces your LDLs. It helps with hypertension. It's been known to be very good for the brain function. So they've done some studies with Alzheimer's and some of the other neurological things like Parkinson's. But certainly it helps with mood and focus. Chocolate also helps with any fatigue. It helps to give you that bit of jolt because there's a little bit of caffeine in there. It's actually theobromine, which is the thing that helps with the fatigue. But it's also been known to help with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Helps with skin, so increasing the function of the keratin in the skin. And it's also very helpful for weight loss. So Those of you that were thinking, oh, I don't want to eat chocolate because I'm losing weight, well, here's the thing, you can. But we want to make sure that if you're going to be eating the chocolate, that it is a high percent of cacao. So we want to be having over 74% of cacao. The higher the cacao levels or the chocolate or cocoa levels, the healthier you're going to be. The other part, too, is when we think about Europe, and especially England, what happened with their chocolate function or manufacture was that they added lots more sugar to it, and they added a lot more milk. So as you increase the cacao levels, you'll find that those chocolates or chocolate bars even have very little sugar. If you can tolerate 100%, you're doing extremely well. If you've been a milk chocolate fan, then you probably want to start increasing the levels of cacao by 10% increments. So if you were eating 33% cacao, increase it to 55, then to 60 and 70 and so on. So if you can get up to 100%, that would be great. Now, the thing about chocolate, too, is that if you're eating the milk chocolate, it offsets the benefits of the flavonols. The sugar and the milk will do that. So this is one of the reasons why you want to have higher cacao levels. The other thing is you might find chocolate where they talk about Dutching. So there's a process called Dutching. So I've seen this with cocoa powders. Now, the thing about Dutching is to reduce the cacao flavor, make it a lot more milder and a lot more beneficial to our tongue, to our palate. But when you do that, you are removing the flavonols and you're reducing the health aspects of chocolate. So here are some of the foods that are that chocolate complement. So I, for one, will roast cauliflower. And before I do the roasting, I'll add some oil to a container, a bowl, and I'll put some chocolate or some cocoa powder in there, salt and pepper, and then I really coat the cauliflower florets and I roast them. And it really brings out the flavor of the cauliflower. It's so yummy and delicious. So the other thing that's really good with that would be things like sweet potatoes. A couple of teaspoons or a little sprinkling of cocoa powder on sweet potatoes really brings the flavor out, and it's a good combination. Of course, we know it works really well with fruit. Strawberries and raspberries, chocolate strawberries and raspberries are absolutely yummy. And then we do know that's great with nuts too. So something like chocolate-coated almonds are absolutely yummy. I really enjoy that. And it's a good combination too because you've got the dark chocolate and then you've got the fiber and the protein that's in the nut. So it's a good combination with those. But chocolate's good on fish too. Yeah, absolutely. You can just sprinkle some of the chocolate on that and it brings out the flavor of the chocolate, and it's a really good combination. I love that. Cheese and chocolate goes well too. So do things like the citrus fruits. They combine pretty well with the chocolates. They complement the chocolates. And there's a lot of the spices that also are complementary. So a lot of the anise, so the licorice flavored spices are great too. Ginger and mint, and even garlic. I have never done the combination of garlic and chocolate, but I guess it works when it's in chilies and soups too. So those are great ways of actually increasing your cacao levels in your diet, besides just having the chocolate bar. I do have some recipes you might be interested in, and if you are, send me an email and I can send those to you. If you have any questions, you can unmute your phone now and go ahead and ask me.